let's get into DM tips and player tips, which I love to throw around and talk with the community about. My first D&D tip this week is to create a list of NPC names so you aren't caught off guard, because you know your players are going to ask every freaking time what the name of that person is. This is not really like a super secret or little known tip for DMs, but I do this. I always make sure that I have a list of male names and female names from A to Z. And then as I pull from them, as I'm in encounters with my players, I just tick them off the list. So if you take a minute, write down 26 or however many letters are in your alphabet, names from A to Z. I usually do like male and female. It gives me a pretty healthy library to pull from. So I'm never really caught off guard when somebody asks like who the name of that person is. And then I actually add down in the list like where they met them so that I can recall that when they come back to those NPCs down the line. And you never know, those NPCs might feature pretty heavily in the story. So it helps you out to understand what their name was, where they come from, so you can keep that consistent for your players. My second DM tip this week is about saving throws and checks. And saves and checks, they don't have to come right as something happens. And I'll do this often in my games to shake up the whole like tell, right? The DM tell. So you can have PCs roll in advance of something happening. The delicious tension of what they rolled for can last for a few minutes, and that's really great. So don't show your hand every time, or you run the risk of training your players to know when something's about to happen. So here's how that looks. If I want to make somebody roll a, let's say a perception check, but I know that they might not encounter what that was for until down the line. I might say, roll a perception check for me, and they do, and then I store that result. And it might be a couple of rooms later where they come into that, and then I'll use the result of that check. So it kind of throws them off a little bit. You don't want to leave too much time in between, because like, you'll have them rolling 20 checks before the game starts. But it's a fun little tweak to make sure that you're never really training your characters to know when something's happening. Because if you call for a check and then something happens every time, then they're going to be able to predict that over time. My third and final DM tip this week is basically to ask the community, what are some of your favorite Dungeon Master tips that you like to use to apply specifically to online gaming for Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds scenario or whatever VTT you like. So a lot of us have moved our games or our play primarily to online. As Dungeon Masters and Game Masters, what are you finding are some of the really great tips that feature specifically in the digital format or VTT? Let me know. Shoot me a DM or share it with me, and I'll give you some credit. We'll share those out if you like. Otherwise, I'm just interested in hearing what you have to say about it. Rounding out our tips for the week, my first player tip this week is to really pay attention to what your fellow PCs are doing in combat. This is going to help develop synergy and unity in what your players can do, how you work together on the battlefield, and really change how you can approach mounting threats and more difficult combatants. So when you're in combat, take a look at the features and the abilities that your fellow players like to use. Figure out, you get a sense of what tactics they like, how they like to fight, and how you can best support and lean on support for that. That party synergy is when things really get off the chain as far as difficulty goes and the types of combat and monsters that you're going to be able to face up against in a more effective manner down the line. My final player tip this week is to simply talk to your Dungeon Master or Game Master. We want your feedback. We look to grow as well. Nobody knows it perfectly, and no one's perfect at knowing it. So take the time to have those conversations with your feedback, myself included. If you have anything you want to share that you think will help us grow or become better at what we're doing or develop a better experience for our tables and our players, that is the deepest form of our investment. Don't be shy. We look forward to your feedback. And let us have it. But be gentle, because contrary to popular belief, we do have feelings.